No, I don't think that's accurate. He was a contributor to the Washington Post on a couple of occasions. Okay. So let's not make him think like he had Bob Woodward's old office in the Washington Post. Okay. He didn't. This is a guy who was very tied to several nefarious groups. One, he was tied very heavily to the Muslim Brotherhood. And number two, he was very tied to the former regime that had been in power, had is the operative word, in Saudi Arabia. And in particular, that bin Talal and Prince Bandar and their group. And remember, when bin Salman took control and his son, Mohammed, is kind of running the show, remember how they had that Four Seasons hotel reception, remember, where they had people hanging by their heels and people were getting beat up and some people died. And there was this, if you will, purging, if you will, right? When it came to, I don't know what he claimed, ethics or whatever. So Khashoggi was very tied to the former regime that had lost power in Saudi Arabia. And remember who his uncle was, Adnan Khashoggi, who was the biggest notorious arms dealer in the world. So this is not, they want to make you think that he's some guy who was like writing articles for the Washington Post and, he was just going to get some papers and so there was a lot going on here. Okay. And I believe when you boil it all down, I believe what the globalists, I think this is a bit of a setup, as you said, more than a bit. It was a big setup, actually. And I think the goal was, by the globalist syndicate that was behind this, was for Khashoggi to die, for the media to start spinning, the media that the globalists own, to be spinning their propaganda Wurlitzer, and in the process, to get enough pressure on Trump so that he would back away from Saudi Arabia. And then I believe they had people in place in Saudi Arabia that were going to try to institute a regime change to bring the old regime back that was globalist controlled, move bin Salman out, and then say, as a reaction to you, Donald Trump, for doing this to us, for breaking relations, you know what we're going to do? We're going to ditch the petrodollar. And this is where it ties into the really fantastic work, Dave, that you have done on the X22 platform of pointing out about where we are financially in the world. You see, I believe that we are at a precipice and actually have already gone over the precipice. It's just that we're not quite aware. It's kind of like Wile E. Coyote going over the cliff and kind of hanging out there for a little bit before he starts to fall. Right. I think we're kind of gone over the cliff and we're kind of hanging there, and Roadrunner's looking at us going, beep, beep. And we're hanging there and we haven't quite started the fall yet. And what the globalists need is they need an event to make that fall occur, for the trapdoor to open. And I believe they were counting on getting things so riled up with their puppets around the world, screaming that this is, the worst thing that ever happened in the world. It was a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but there's a horrible thing and Trump be pushed into sanctioning Saudi Arabia, which would then, I believe, lead to them saying, okay, you're going to sanction us. Guess what? We're pulling the petrodollar, which would pull the rug out financially. And this is so people would point the finger at Trump as being the cause of the financial calamities that ensued with the pulling of the petrodollar, rather than the real perpetrators of why the financial system is imploding, which is the globalist syndicate and their central banking system, and in particular in the United States, the Federal Reserve. And the timing of the Khashoggi thing, which happened right before midterms, gave Trump enough time potentially for him to also blow up the election here, okay, against against conservatives, against libertarians, and in favor of globalist candidates. So the timing about the Khashoggi thing, I don't think was a coincidence. I do believe Trump did not take the bait.
I agree.
And because Trump did not take the bait, the globalists didn't have their event to pull open the trap door and have Wile E. Coyote start falling toward the bottom of the canyon. But I believe the globalists will look for other events to push, to support, to have that event happen. And this is why Trump at the same time, starting around, if I remember correctly, October 10th, he started to point at the Federal Reserve, right? And you've pointed this out. Very few people are pointing this out. You're doing it, I'm doing it. But But he went on record, I believe it was October 10th, and said, hey, the real problem here, the real problem is the Fed. October 10th, I think the Fed has gone crazy. October 15th, my biggest threat is the Fed. October 23rd, every time we do something, Powell and the Fed raises interest rates. The biggest threat to the U.S. economy, Trump replied, was the Fed, October 23rd. And then, as you pointed out so articulately in one of your last videos, President Trump says the Federal Reserve, and this was reported in the Washington Post on November 27th, says the Federal Reserve is, quote, a much bigger problem than China, end quote. You see, Trump realizes, and when he was running for president, Dave, and this is what's frustrating to a lot of people, you and myself included, when he was running for president, he was saying, look, this economy is in a bubble. It's all smoke and mirrors. The numbers are bogus. This is BS. The stock market is being inflated through all this funny money being pumped in by the central bank. That's what he was saying. And then he gets elected, and he's like, oh, well, this is my stock market, and isn't it doing great? No, he's not a dumb guy. He's not a dumb guy. And here's what I think happened. I believe, and remember when after he was elected, before he was inaugurated, he had a meeting that preceded a photo op that occurred in the Oval Office, where they're both sitting in the yellow chairs in front of the fireplace. And Trump looked off at that meeting, at that photo op. He seemed very, very concerned and very different. And Obama seemed kind of jumpy himself. And what I believe happened at the meeting before the photo op is I believe Trump went into that meeting thinking, okay, we got big financial trouble in this country. We're 21.5 trillion in debt. But you know what? We're gonna get out of this. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna do some tax changes, and we're gonna grow out of this. And what we're also gonna do is we're gonna inflate our way out of this by devaluing the dollar a bit, and maybe we might even have to default on some debt, but we're going to get out of this. I got a plan. And frankly, let's face it, if you want somebody to run the country, you want somebody who knows about bankruptcy, and Donald Trump knows bankruptcy.
Yes, he does.
He's one of the very few people that can come out of bankruptcy and make lemonade out of lemons. So that's why I think one of the reasons why he's there. So I think he had a plan. But at the meeting before, I think he was confronted with information that showed him that, hey, Mr. President-elect, there's 21.5 trillion in debt, but guess what? That's just the tip of the iceberg. And we know you know about the unfunded mandates and all that kind of stuff, with Social Security and Medicare and Oh, no. That's the tip of the iceberg. Here's some other pieces of information you need to know. And I think he realized, oh my gosh, we can't grow out of this, inflate our way out of this, or even potentially default our way out of this. And I think that's why he decided he needed to buy time. And the way he bought time is he brought some globalists around him to work, but also as almost, if you will, hostages. And that's Mnuchin and Ross and Gary Cohen. And he said, essentially, yeah, guess what? We're on the Titanic, boys, and we've already hit the iceberg. And you guys are the ones who put the iceberg there. And guess what? You're not getting off this boat alive. So boom, you're on. And you help create this mess. You're going to help solve this mess. And yeah, you're hostages. I really believe that was part of it. And the other part is I think he started taking ownership and said, okay, we're going to use the magic wand to keep pumping up the stock market, and we're going to keep pumping up all these other markets because it buys me time. It buys me time to establish a relationship with Putin, with other world leaders, with Xi Jinping, so we can work out how we potentially get out of this. Because let's face it, if the United States goes down, China is in big trouble. If the United States goes down, Europe goes down. If Europe goes down, Russia also has some issues. So I really believe the reason why he started talking about the market, okay, this is my market now. This is my economy now. This is, I think he was doing that to buy time. I think he was trying to get it as high as he could, knowing full well that it is going to come down, that there has to be some type of reset. And I think that's where we are right now. And I think that this G20 meeting, they're going to be pointing the finger at, well, what happened at Ukraine and those ships off of Crimea and all this kind of stuff. And I think they're doing that as look at the shiny object, look at the shiny object. Meanwhile, they're working on other issues. And I think the other issues they're working on at this G20 meeting is a financial situation worldwide.
Yeah, I do believe that